This is Join Us in France, episode 266. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and today's episode is going to be a solo show where I tell you about 3 things you might be doing wrong when planning your trip to France. At least these are 3 things that you should consider when coming to France that wouldn't matter so much in other parts of the world. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/266. That's the number 266. And if you're planning a trip to France, the site is chock full of great resources. You should check it out. So here you go. Here are the 3 things that I think people do wrong when planning a trip to Paris. And if you're thinking, how preposterous, how would she know? Well, I've been doing a lot of trip reports. I think there are 150 trip reports in the lineup for this podcast. And so I've been talking to a lot of people. And I kind of get a bird's eye view of what happens when people plan a trip to France. And one of the things that I think a lot of people get wrong is not checking opening and closing times. Now, we look at them, of course, when we first look at, we're thinking, I want to go see the Orsay Museum. So at that time, you'll look at it and you'll realize that it's closed on Mondays, and so you put it on a different day. But if something happens and all of a sudden you didn't get to go to the Orsay Museum on Sunday, you say, we'll go tomorrow. Yeah, you won't. And at least half of the people I talk to mention at some point in their trip report that they went and did something that didn't work out because it was closed. So I'm going to tell you that you should not assume that stores and museums will be open every day. French people don't keep long hours like Americans. As a matter of fact, I was shocked when I moved to America to see how many stores were open 24/7. It's like, and very quickly you get used to it. You just think, I can go pick up some milk at 11 p.m. Well, no, not in France. You can't. I was stopped at a red light recently in a neighborhood where I grew up. So this is a place I know very well. And I turned my head and I noticed that this one store that already had a reputation for being open long hours, it now says they're open 24/7, which is probably the only store in the Toulouse metro that does that. I mean, I haven't checked, but it's possibly the only one out of thousands of grocery stores. So in France, don't assume things are going to be open. Check it, okay? And this is especially true outside of Paris, but even in Paris, people don't want to work 24/7. And if they don't have the funding to have enough employees to keep it open long hours, then they just won't. Even touristy areas like, say, the Mont Saint-Michel or Carcassonne, they slow down a lot during low tourist season. Maybe that chateau you've wanted to see, well, maybe they stop letting people in at 5 p.m. The grocery stores, most of them are closed by 7 p.m. In big cities, it's more like 8 or 9, but in small places, it might be 7 p.m. Some places only open in the afternoon. Some places close for a couple of days a week. Not grocery stores, but venues, small museums. There are parks and activities for kids that are only open during French school vacations. And almost every place has different hours for low season and high season. Even popular places, I was in Collioure recently. Collioure is very touristy. Well, we were there the week before Christmas, and the tourist office was closed all week. The Maison du Fauvisme, which is a major attraction there, it was closed for 3 weeks. It's not that there were no visitors around. It's that they need some time off. They don't have the funding to have people year round. And so they close, So here's my challenge to you. Once you have your itinerary nailed down, imagine you're sitting at the airport, you're waiting for boarding. Check opening and closing times again. And when you check into your hotel at night, check opening and closing times for the next day's activities. Just make sure, right? And if you change things around, then make sure that your spur-of-the-moment change isn't going to mean that you try to go to the Louvre on a Tuesday because it's closed on a Tuesday. I don't expect you to remember all of these opening and closing times, and they're so complicated. Nobody remembers all this stuff. I get taken by this stuff too. But check before you go. So an easy way to check this, I think by now most of us travel with data on our phone. It can be done pretty cheaply. So Google the place of the name you want and add hours and you'll find it within seconds. You just have to remember to check. The second thing that people do wrong when visiting Paris is that they underestimate the distances between Paris attractions. Now, most of us can walk 20 kilometers in a day if we have to, but many of us won't enjoy that if we're really honest with ourselves because we're on vacation and, it's a lot. There are cities where you can eyeball how long the walk is going to be, like New York City. Once you know that city blocks are long going east to west and short going north to south, you can estimate the distance pretty accurately. Do not try that in Paris, especially if the only map of Paris you have present in mind is the metro map. That map is totally unrealistic when it comes to distances. There is a map that shows walking distances between metro stations. I will find it and put a link to it on the show notes. But what you need to do is ask Google what the distance is between where you are and where you want to go. And just check it. Be sure. On a recent episode, my guest said that they walked from the Louvre to the Luxembourg Gardens with their preschool children. That's a couple of kilometers. It's going uphill softly. But by the time they got to the gardens, they were too tired and they didn't explore the gardens very much. So my point is, if your intent is to go see the Luxembourg Gardens, save your steps for the Luxembourg Gardens. Don't walk all the way there because especially with young kids, or anyone really. I mean, that's a hoof, If you're at the Eiffel Tower and you decide you want to see the Orsay Museum, well, it's only 2.5 kilometers. You could say, I'll just walk. But then are you going to get cranky while visiting the Orsay Museum because you're tired? So, and again, save your energy for the visit of the venue. And of course, this doesn't apply to athletes who train all the time. But for the rest of us mortals, I walk a 6K every day with my dogs, which, it's not amazing, but most people don't do that. And I notice the difference when I'm in Paris. It's a lot more walking than my usual 6K. So I will challenge you to learn to use the Google Maps for public transportation. I think in Paris, the best transportation app is City Mapper. But I mean, whatever app you're comfortable with, use that. And if you're from, I would say, and this is generally speaking, if you're from a big city where you take the metro at least some of the time, then use the Paris Metro. But if you never take public transportation at home, then choose the bus. Paris has a great bus system. It can take you just about anywhere. And if you didn't buy bus tickets in advance, which I recommend you should do, but you can pay the bus driver. It's pretty easy. And to find the bus stop, the biggest problem is often to find the bus stop. So what you need to do is, like in City Mapper, you have to kind of zoom in and see exactly where you're walking. Or you just show your phone to somebody and say, where's that bus stop? And if they're locals, they can probably show you. All right. And the third thing that I think people do wrong when planning a first-time trip to Paris is that they plan things on the day that they arrive. I think you need to keep your first day wide open. In my opinion, you shouldn't schedule anything that has to have timed tickets for the day you arrive, because too much might happen. So, again, a recent episode, they had bought tickets to the Atelier des Lumières for that afternoon. So they had given it plenty of time, right? But the kids were very cranky and it just didn't happen. So there are places where you need a time ticket. The Louvre is one. The Eiffel Tower is one. The Atelier des Lumières is one. Those keep for a different day. On your first day, there are plenty you can do. You can walk around whatever neighborhood you're staying in. Hopefully it's central, Paris, because that's the best way to enjoy the city for a first-time visitor. And if you walk around, it'll help you with jet lag. When I arrive somewhere after a long flight, I'm usually tired, okay? This is low energy, so this is the day to try cafes. Maybe you can pop into the neighborhood church if it's open, because they have closing and opening times too. Most of them by 5 p.m. closed, especially in the winter. Maybe you could go to the nearest museum, even if it's not a famous museum. This is the day to do all the flâneur thing. Flâneur is this wonderful word in French that means to walk around with no particular aimless walking, which I think there needs to be some time for that when you're in Paris. So just look around your neighborhood, look for pharmacies and grocery stores near your hotel or your apartment. Get the lay of the land. Don't rush around too much. You might want to go out to a restaurant, but don't make reservations. Just, again, the first day, don't make reservations for that first day. Another thing you could do on that first day is take a boat ride. In Paris, unlike many other cities, the most wonderful monuments are all along the river. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And that makes a boat tour better than a bus tour. In my opinion, that's just me, okay? And there are several companies that do this. But the ones that I think are easiest are, there's one called Vedette du Pont Neuf. So that's if you're near the Pont Neuf. The Bateau Mouche, the name is famous because they've been better at advertising, but they're near the Alexander III Bridge. Vedette de Paris, if you're by the Eiffel Tower. And one mistake that people make, again, not estimating the distances very well, is that they think that they need to go to the Bateau Mouche for some reason, or they tell Google to take them to the Bateau Mouche, and they have to hoof it like two kilometers to get there. You don't need to. There's probably one closer to you. Go to the closest one. You don't need a reservation. I've never, even in the highest season, I've never seen more than maybe 20 people in line. So those boats can take hundreds of people. So don't worry. Just go on the spur of the moment. And of course, one more thing you can do on your first day in Paris that doesn't need to be done at any specific time is one of my self-guided walking tours of Paris. So you can just get one of them. There's one for the Ile de la Cité. There's one for the Marais. There's one for Montmartre. Montmartre is a little further away. And there's soon to be a fourth one that I'm going to be announcing in a moment. Those you can take any time of day. So install the Voice Map app, look for Paris Tours by Annie Sargent, and there you have it. Or if you want to get a little bit of a discount, get them on joinusinfrance.com/audio tours. You can do them anytime. You can stop and go. You can stop at a cafe if you want to. Anyway, I will recommend along the way things that you can pop into that are marvelous. So yeah, that's something that you can do anytime. But I would say don't book a guided tour with a human being, because what if you don't make it? That day for some reason your flight is delayed, you feel sick. I don't know what could happen. So just to recap, I would like you to get into the habit of checking opening and closing times. Number 2, be aware of distances and don't trust your gut feeling about how far it's going to be. And keep your first day wide open. I think this will help anybody have a better time in Paris. Thank you, Patricia Cleary, for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. Patrons enjoy several rewards that you'll find listed at patreon.com/join us, Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. I share exclusive content with my patrons, including help with French, stories about France, photos, membership into a secret Facebook group, lots of rewards for the patrons. And of course, patrons can message me directly through Patreon, and these messages always get top priority. So again, this is patreon.com/join us to see the different reward tiers. And thank you so much for giving back. I'm also available to review your itinerary for France. It'll cost you $50, but you know what? It can save you a lot of time, and I will check those opening and closing times for you. So if you don't have the time to do this, let me do it. Send me an email that says itinerary review, and we'll get right on that. My email address is annie@joinusinfrance.com. For my personal update this week, well, you can hear that my bronchitis/asthma thing isn't quite cleared up, but I'm feeling a lot better. Thank goodness for modern medicine. But my voice isn't quite all the way back. But I'm really excited to be going back to Paris for a couple of weeks. Early February, I'm going to work on a Saint-Germain-des-Prés tour. I love the area. There's so many stories. And, for somebody who grew up in France, but not in Paris, and I was a bookworm in my childhood. My mom actually went to see my teacher once and said, I don't understand. She's always reading books. She never plays with other kids. I did play with other kids. I just liked the books a lot. And this went on until I was late teens. And then when I went to college, I had to stop reading for pleasure and start reading for college. And I didn't really get back into reading until Audible came around. Yeah, Audible has changed things for me because I love listening to things, and so I listen to a ton of books. Anyway, so I know all these stories about things that happened in Paris and important historical events and whatever, but I not having grown up in Paris, I didn't see the places for the most part, and so it's really exciting for me to go seek them out and plot them on a map and take you to right where the stories are. So this is I'm really looking forward to this. But before I go to Paris, I'm going to participate in the bird count for the first time in my life. I have feeders around my house. I now have 3, and I'm planning on making one. So that'll be 4 of them. And I was told that it's totally okay to count birds at feeders. But now the thing is I have to recognize them, right? And so I've been looking up birds and taking photos of them, which is a challenge. I think I mentioned it before on the show that I love photography. I don't do so much basketball photography anymore, so I've turned to birds instead. And they move super fast. But it's a challenge and it's great, and I'm getting better at it. So I take all these photos of birds and then I ask people, so what bird is this? And anyway, it's just it's a fun thing for me to do. And I've tried to share some of my bird photos on Instagram stories, but the problem is you can't share photos to Instagram stories from the laptop. But I take my photos with a DSLR, and so they're all on my laptop. And I can't, it's not, they don't make it easy, let's put it this way. But when I'm in Paris, early February, I'll share places I go on Instagram stories. So if you want to follow me, it's Addicted to France on Instagram. So a brief update on the strike situation. People talk a lot about these strikes like they're surprised that they're happening. Don't be surprised. Strikes happen all the time in France. It's just that this one is getting a lot of press. And even a lot of people who participate in the Facebook group, they say, I was in Paris in the middle of these strikes, and then I get home and I see the coverage, and it looks like two different worlds. Like the coverage on the news make it look like apocalyptic in Paris, and that's not what's happening. So my recommendation is, if in general, because this will happen again, it's not over and it will continue to happen. In general, if you are strike averse, I would say do not book a hotel anywhere near République. That's an area where most demonstrations start or end. And they're usually there for a long time because they gather, over a long time, whatever. Some of these demonstrations are so tiny that you hardly, because République is a big area, you hardly notice them, But the big ones you do notice. But there are demonstrations starting at République just about 3-4 times a week. I mean, it's the demonstration area. So stay away from that area. The other thing is, if you want to avoid trouble with public transportation, stay in centrally. There are 3 areas that I really like. I really like the Marais. I really like Saint-Germain-des-Prés. And I really like also the Palais Royal area is also very central. I'll do another solo episode about hotel recommendations in these places. But it's if you stay in those areas, you can hoof it just about anywhere. And I think that would be a good decision for especially a first-time visitor to Paris. If you've been there 20 times, all bets are off. You probably have your habits. You probably have you know how, you figured it out by now. So you don't need my help. I mean, I hope you enjoy my help, but you don't need it. You're self-sufficient. But I'm talking to a lot of people, and I realize this more and more on the Facebook group, who are saying, this is my first visit to France, my first time in Paris. Or a lot of them, it's their first time out of the US. And that's why I can't tell them, I have to be careful what I tell them, because it's very different for somebody who's been around France many times and be somebody who has not. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a short episode, but my voice is suffering. I've been drinking water to try and stop the cough. All right, so lots of people, they don't think about looking for a podcast to plan a trip to France. So tell them about it, because I think it's a great way to learn about the country and to decide what's for you and what's not. We're on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, any app that they use to listen to podcasts. And if they don't listen to podcasts, maybe you could show them how. It's not that difficult really anymore. And if you want to review Join Us in France, you can go to ratethispodcast.com/join us. It's a new service. I signed up just to hear what people have to say about the podcast. And, I love when people gush about this podcast. So obviously we have hundreds of reviews on iTunes. I don't go there very much. When I go, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of people who listen and enjoy the podcast. So that's very gratifying. So excited for a new voice map tour of Saint-Germain-des-Prés and the left bank. But if you want to check out the 3 that are already out there, go to joinusinfrance.com/audio tours. Or install the free voice map app on your phone and then look for Tours of Paris. And there I be, Annie Sargent, Tours by Annie Sargent. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Have a great time in France or a great week of trip planning. And I will talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2019 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.